Good day everyone, I am Daniela Maris de Jesus and I will discuss about the Spanish colonial art and the American colonial art. Let's now move first to the Spanish colonial art during 1521 to 1898. For our topics today, we will have the architecture, the sculpture, the painting, and the printing. For their architecture, the early paintings and sculpture works for the church were largely given to the Chinese artisans living in a community outside Intramuros called the Parian. So when we say Parian, it is the designated area outside the Intramuros where they regulate the Chinese merchants or what we call the sanglays in order for them to sell and it becomes their marketplace. While Father Antonio Sedeno introduced lime, a significant component of cement, and responsible for the constructions of the first fortress and instrumental in the planning of the building of the Manila secular residences. So he introduces lime since lime were very flexible and accessible at the same time and because when it is mixed in sand and water, it forms actually a mortar that is good for binding stones. Some of the pictures of Father Antonio Sideno and the first fortress, which is the Nuestra Senora de Guia Fort, that did not survive today and just part of the modern day Manila with little to no visible remains. And here's the picture of the Intramuros or the outside of the Intramuros, which we call the Parian, where the Chinese artisans are. Sculpture. It is a carving which begins in the pre-Hispanic times in making the likha or a local deity was erected by the friars into the creation of santos, sculptures of saints. So before the Spaniards came, the likha referred to as the wooden idols or carved figures that represent the indigenous spirits that used to be or that's used in rituals or offering. But then when the Spaniards later came, it is redirected in santos like the sculptures of saints and encouraged the worship of this kind of figures. Then most of the santos that time were made up of the wood, the animal bones, and the ivory. So the most available one is the wood, and the making of them were strictly supervised by the church authorities for the fear that the natives might include pagan elements. When we say pagan elements, those were the symbols on or designs that are not part of the Catholic teaching. So here are the examples of the sculpture during those times. For wood, we have the Virgin of Montezart, which is the statue of Black Madonna and the Child. For animal bones, we have the bone carved relicarios or the small hold religious relics. And for ivory, we have the ivory Madonna or the Virgin and Child, which symbolize motherhood or holiness. So the santos of ivory and animal bone are usually of the kita ipon or remove and put type. The body parts were also removable, and the santos those times are adorned with glass for eyes, human hair for its hair, and as well as the lashes. For the clothing, we have the velvet and silk embroidered with gold and silver threads which glimmered with sequins and semi-precious stone. So here are the examples of the use of animal bones and ivory as a medium. So the famous two sculptors during this time were Juan de los Santos that carved the retablos for the Augustine Church in Intramuros, and Lorenzo Flores which carved the escudo of the Franciscan order in front of the Tayabas Church. Here are some of the pictures of it. While in painting, a rise of national consciousness was expressed through the reform government during the 19th century, and the Sociedad Económica de Amigos de la País, a civic conscious organization that is aimed to encourage the development of the visual arts that led to the establishment of the Escuela de Dibujo y Pintura in 1821. Here's the example or the picture of the first formal institution in the Philippines to offer an education for drawing and painting, which is the Escuela de Dibujo y Pintura. The one in our screen is Damian Domingo, which is the first teacher of the Escuela de Dibujo y Pintura, and the technique of the painting during this time was made from his works. where detailed and fine lines give volume or body to the objects or parts of the human figure. The quality of softness in the rendering of the lines suggests the use of the Chinese brush. So, he is a mestizo whose talents impressed most of the local authorities. Here are some of the famous paintings of Damian Domingo. And we have the 1832 the Del Monte collection, which is the portrait of Don Jose Maria Peñaranda, and the Un Indio Noble de Manila, and the Nuestra Señora del Santissimo Rosario. Unfortunately, the school closed in 1834, but they opened 20 years later. In the beginning of its teachers were Spaniards, but later on the dictatorship were given to the Filipinos. And the school was incorporated with the Escuela de Pintura, Escultura y Grabado in 1879. While here are some of the earliest portraits examples that are done in miniature during those time, and some of it were the size of a thumbnail, and the painters are called the miniaturists, whose styles are characterized by fine lines to delineate details, and large portraits of the wealthy natives were begun to appear in 1850. So, Juan Luna and Felix Hidalgo were the two local 19th century artists that became famous abroad during this time. The two famous works of Juan Luna during those times were first the Spoliarium, which won gold in 1884 at the Exposition General de Bellas Artes. It is an award-winning piece that depicts the brutal scene of the Roman gladiators that being dragged to Spoliarium, which is a room where defeated gladiators were stripped. While the second one that won a silver medal in 1881 was the La Muerte de Cleopatra, that depicts the tragic death of Cleopatra and highlights the emotions and classical themes of Luna's work. On the other hand, Felix Hidalgo's work and achievement were the Christian virgins exposed to the populace at the Exposition General de Bellas Artes as well, that won a silver medal. Its meaning were the portraits of the Christian virgins who were publicly humiliated and tortured. In printing, we have two outstanding engravers, which are Nicolas Bagay and Francisco Suarez, both known for their designs in 1733 and for the 12 scenes depicting representative life in the island. They signed their works proudly writing Indio Tagalog after their signature. So this Indio Tagalog were the symbolism of how they are proudly asserted as a Filipino heritage as well as their identity. So the 12 scenes that were mentioned a while ago is the Murillo Velarde map. The Murillo Velarde map was created in 1734 that features the 12 vignettes depicting life in the Philippines that showcase a diverse population and key destinations. Was collaborated by the artist Francisco Suarez and the engraver printer Nicolas de la Cruz Bagay. While the paintings in 18th century engravings were printed from copper plates and woodcuts, while in 19th century were the introduction of lithography or lithograph prints that eventually replaced engraving on the copper. Now let's move on to my second topic, which is the American colonial art period in 1898 to 1946. For this discussion, we only have three topics, which are the architecture, sculpture, and the painting. The architecture during those times where the American influence in construction activities were evident in the introduction of new materials like the concrete, the glass, and as well as the steel in the neoclassical architectural style. When we say neoclassical, it draws inspiration from ancient Greek and Roman buildings that emphasizes simplicity, lines, straight edges, and as well as elegance. Some of the architects this times were Juan Arellano, Tomas Mapua, and Antonio Toledo. We will see some of their works. First is Juan Arellano's famous works, the Manila's Metropolitan Theater, the Rizal Memorial Sports Complex, and as well as the Manila Central Post Office Building. While for Thomas Mapua, we have the Philippine General Hospital Nurses Home and the Philippine School for the Deaf. while Antonio Toledo's famous works were the Manila City Hall and the Department of Tourism building. While in sculpture, only one name stood out, and that is Guillermo Tolentino, the sculptor of the Bonifacio Monument in Caloocan City, Philippines. Here is the picture of him and his work. While the Bonifacio Monument is completed in 1933, and the symbol of this is the courage and revolution and nationalism of the Filipinos. And for our last topic for today, we have the painting. Filipino painters depicted scenes from the countryside, and Fabian de la Rosa and Fernando Amorsolo dominated and influenced the art scene and their landscape and genre painting. De la Rosa painted rice planters, while Amorsolo's work is entitled Planting Rice. Now, here's the sample painting of the rice planters by Fabian de la Rosa, and it captures the hard work and simplicity of the Filipino farmers that showcase the rural life and the importance of rice cultivation. Here is the example work of Fernando Amorsolo's Planting Rice, that vivid portrayal of a rural life. It uses light and colors to bring the scene of life and warmth and optimism. So that's the end of our discussion for today, and thank you so much for listening. Again, I am Daniela Maris P. De Jesus from 1MB, and I'm one of the reporters of the Part 5.